Hello, welcome to this module on choosing games for your classroom. Now in the last section we talked about how to incorporate games into your curriculum. And hopefully you found something that's like, oh yes, I can use that, that makes sense and that works for me. If not, always reach out, feel free to reach out. We're here to help and guide any way we can. And now let's say, okay, I've decided I want to use a game. Now I need to find the right game. How do you go about finding the game for your class or multiple games? Because very few games cover the entire curriculum, entire school year or the entire semester and all the content you might want. So usually they cover a portion. So you may have to look for multiple games instead of just a single game. So how do you go about choosing the right game? Where can you go? Is there a website that can tell you what games are good or not good? Well, unfortunately, currently there is not. The reason being, there may be some websites out there that give educational games a rating. Usually those ratings are done by one single person. In my opinion, that's not really a valid rating. Well, why? If that's an expert on game-based learning, for example, I consider myself somewhat knowledgeable about game-based learning, couldn't I rate educational games? Not really, or not by myself. Because I'm not an expert in math, I'm not an expert in instructional design or learning design. I'm not an assessment expert. I'm not a math teacher. Both are all required to rate a game. You need to look at the content. Is the content of the game accurate? Well, that requires a content expert, the subject matter expert. So on the subject the game is to be used on. So if we're talking about math, well, we need a math expert to verify that the content, the mathematical content of the game is actually correct. Or if it's chemistry, biology, if it's history, we need the expert, the subject matter expert, to verify, yes, the content of the game is correct. Then we need the instructional designer to help us understand, to rate the game from an instructional perspective. Does this make sense? The way the game is structured. Is the instruction properly structured, properly scaffolded so that students can learn it? Now you have a learning designer who looks at it from a student perspective. When a student plays the game, does certain activities in the game, engages with it, are they actually, those activities, are they actually enhancing or helping the learning experience or not? And that's purely from a student perspective versus from a teaching perspective, the instructional designer does. And of course, we'd like to have, ideally, a teacher also rate the game on how to incorporate, yes, this is a game I can incorporate into my classroom, into my curriculum, and here are the ways we can do that. Because none of the people, the math experts, the instructional designers, the learning designer, they're not the ones in the classroom actually using the game as part of their classes. So ideally, we want to hear from a teacher who's rating the game, yes, that's a good game, or this is how it can be used in a classroom. And again, I kind of like to stay away from a rating that's good or bad, because it's like, how do we rate a book, a textbook? Can you rate it? Well, verify the content is accurate, verify that everything is in there from a subject matter expertise, from an instructional perspective. We can look at it from a learning perspective, and from a teaching perspective, how do we use it? But we don't really rate it, oh, it's good or it's bad. Now, if some of these elements are missing, of course, and it's bad. But let's assume all of the elements are there. Well, then they're all equally good. Because remember, just like the hammer, I can use it when appropriate. Right? And it's the same with the game. If the content is there, the instructional, the learning, and I can incorporate it to my class, if all of those elements are there, well, yes, it's a good game, and no, it's not, because it all depends on the situation, how I want to use it. But that's the start. And then, of course, last but not least, you want to have a game designer on the panel giving her or his input and saying, yes, from a game design perspective, this is a good game design. So those are 5 people. And then, last but not least, you're going to get that eventually, there's your student. Do the students actually like it? Are they enjoying it? Now, unfortunately, that's not a question we ask a lot, no matter what it is we use in the classroom. We don't ask the student if they like a certain book. Oh, this is a textbook. And then, hey, how did you like the textbook? Should we use a different textbook? That's not a question we ask. But the student is important in all of this. But you're going to find out from the students how they're going to like the game or not. But at least you should have these 5 people. The subject matter expert, the instructional designer, the learning designer, a teacher, and a game designer. All rate, give their opinion on the quality of the game you're looking at. Today, as far as I know, we don't have a rating system that actually does that, where you can go, yes, these games have been evaluated by all 5, and here is their evaluation of a given game. So, not having that, how do we get the right game? How do we choose the right game for our class? So, knowing that, how do we choose the right game for our class when there isn't yet an expert panel that can tell us, give us their expert opinion on any given game? Well, you're somewhat unfortunately left to your own devices. Do you have colleagues that can take a look at it? Has somebody else used the game before and written about it? Many games, educational games, the folks that create the games, if that's researchers, designers, they will try to publish some research on the games. So look up, can you find the research? And in the research, you will hopefully learn more what's the content. Right? You could ask a colleague, if you're teaching something, if there's somebody around that has instructional experience, instructional design experience, to take a look at it. There may be videos online that you can look at. Now, most educational games come from an educational publisher, and so you can ask the publisher themselves, okay, I'd like to see, a detailed explanation of the content, the instructional design, learning design approaches, and the guide how to incorporate this into my classroom. And so I may be able to provide that to you, to help you. Beyond that, it's really, you're going to have to start playing the game or watch somebody else play the game and form your own opinion. Because there's nothing else really that's going to be able to help you. You're not going to choose a book for your classroom without looking at it first, if the choice is yours, of course. The same with a game. You want to have a look at it before using it. You're playing it yourself, and you probably want to play it multiple times, because many games you don't have just one choice, one path you can travel down, as we previously discussed. Or watch somebody else plays a game, and then make your decision based on that. Now you may be saying, well, I don't have the time, I can't do that, that's too much, there's just too many games out there. Well, call on an expert. There are universities all across the country, Texas A&M being one, and our research lab, and ask them for recommendations. Ask them, hey, I'm interested in using this game. Could you give me an expert opinion? There are game-based learning experts all over. Ask them, reach out to them. They might be more than happy to help you evaluate or find the right people to evaluate a given game and work with you. And then view it as an experiment. Don't view it as oh, it's gonna work or it's not gonna work, right? And what does it mean if it's gonna work, right? Again, for whom, in what situation? But look at it as an experiment, because we already assume that an experiment may not correctly work, or may not everything in the experiment work. So you say, like, okay, I'm going to use the game. I've made myself very knowledgeable about the different factors that influence the game, the content of it, the instructional side, the learning side, the gaming aspect. And I'm going to experiment in my class. And the experiment, obviously you gather data as you're using it. And then you analyze at the end, okay, based on the data you've gathered, what is most important to you? Was it engagement? Was it student mastery? And of certain subjects, right? Certain skills, where they struggled, but now they're doing better, and you can see that. Was it the class conversation, the deeper context students were able to interact with? What are the things that are most important? How did you measure those in your experiment? And what does the data tell you? And then based on that data after your experiment, now you can decide, okay, well, I have to make some adjustments, or I have to use the game in a different way, or it's the wrong game. I have to use a different game. But just because one game doesn't work in one situation with a certain set of students doesn't mean all games don't work. If you treat it like an experiment, so like, I'm going to experiment with this and try this out, I think you will be rewarded with the right set of results. Because again, with an experiment, we don't expect, oh yes, it's going to work, right? We're going to change something, because everybody talks about change, right? Oh, we're going to change X. And then we have those like, yes, people that are all excited about the change. And then we have those people that, oh, no change. We're fine the way things are, right? Because it always seems to be a binary thing. Change, there is something new, and not change, everything stays the way it is today. But when we say, hey, we're going to just do an experiment, oh, okay, yeah, sure, we can do an experiment. Nobody has to do anything, right? It's an experiment. It doesn't mean we're going to change everything. It also doesn't mean that things stay the way they are. We're going to do an experiment, we gather data, then we analyze the data, and then make a decision based on what we've learned. And along the way, many people say, oh, this was really good, why we should do more of that. This didn't really work, and here's the reasons why. And if it didn't work, then you can look at, okay, can we overcome those hurdles that prevented it from working or not? So treat it as an experiment and announce it as an experiment. That way it sets a very different set of expectations. And last but not least, don't be afraid to experiment with an entertainment game in your class. Oh, I don't want to use entertainment, they're already playing too many games and so on. It's okay. Because remember what we talked about. A lot of entertainment games take artistic freedom to do things in a different way. Imagine if your students would be critical thinkers the next time they play their favorite game and start thinking, I wonder if this is actually correct or not, the way the game designer is showcasing it to us. I hope this was helpful to you. And I wish you a most wonderful rest of your day. Thank you. And with that, as always, if you like the video, please hit the like button. If you like the channel, please subscribe and leave comments. Tell us, what do you like to see? Who do you like to hear from? So we can hopefully create those videos for you. Have a wonderful day.